The classroom buzzed with teenage chatter, pencils tapping against desks, and the faint hum of the overhead lights. In the back row, by the window, sat Anaya, a quiet girl with tired eyes and a neatly braided ponytail that always fell over her left shoulder. She never spoke unless spoken to, never raised her hand, and always walked with her head slightly down, as if the world was too heavy to look in the eye. No one really knew her story. No one cared to ask. To most of her classmates, she was invisible. But to a small group of cruel kids, her silence made her the perfect target. It started with whispers. Snickers when she walked by. Then came the notes left on her desk, mean jokes scribbled in red ink. The more she ignored it, the bolder they became. They wanted a reaction. And when she refused to give them one, they decided to take it further. On a rainy Thursday morning, as the sky outside wept and students trickled into first period, the three bullies, Sarah, Mina, and Adil, planned something they thought would be funny. A cruel joke. A little, harmless fun. Anaya had just taken her seat. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her notebook. Her fingers were wrapped in tiny band-aids, her anxious habit of picking at her skin had worsened lately. She had barely settled when she felt it. A sharp tug at the back of her head. A snip. Then another. And then, pain. She gasped, a silent breath caught in her throat. Her hand reached back instinctively and came away with strands of her hair, cut unevenly, some of it now stained with a thin line of red. The classroom burst into cruel laughter. Adil waved a pair of scissors mockingly. Mina covered her mouth as she laughed. Sarah filmed it on her phone, whispering, "Look at her face. So dramatic." Anaya didn't scream. She didn't cry. But something inside her shifted, like a dam cracking. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The teacher wasn't in the room yet. For the first time in years, Anaya didn't care about staying invisible. She walked to the front of the class, her cut hair falling in front of her shoulders. Her voice, though low, pierced the room. "You think this is funny," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You think hurting someone who never did anything to you makes you powerful?" The room went silent. For the first time in years, Anaya didn't care about staying invisible. She walked to the front of the class, her cut hair falling in front of her shoulders. Her voice, though low, pierced the room. "You think this is funny," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You think hurting someone who never did anything to you makes you powerful?" The room went silent. "They cut my hair," she said, louder now. They laughed. They enjoyed it. And all of you watched. No one moved. A few kids looked down in shame. Sarah slowly lowered her phone. Mina stopped smiling. Anaya reached into her backpack and pulled out something unexpected, her sketchbook. She held it open. Page after page, filled with drawings. Drawings of the bullies mocking her. The cruel things they said. The way they stared. She had documented everything, like an emotional journal, but with images so vivid they felt alive. "I remember everything," she said. "You thought I was quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was surviving." There was a shift in the air. The bell hadn't even rung yet, but the entire class felt something powerful happening. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the door. It was Miss Zoya, their homeroom teacher. She had walked in during the confrontation, unnoticed. Her eyes swept the room, then landed on the scissors on the floor and the pieces of hair scattered like confetti. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she simply said, "Anaya, come with me." That afternoon, the school called in the bullies' parents. Sarah's phone was confiscated. The video she took became damning evidence. All three of them were suspended for assault and cyberbullying. But more importantly, something changed in the school after that day. Anaya was no longer invisible. Other students, some of whom had once laughed or looked away, came up to her. Some apologized. Some asked about her drawings. A few even asked if they could sit with her at lunch. She didn't forgive easily. But she didn't isolate herself anymore either. She joined the school's art club. She was asked to paint a mural for the hallway. And when she stood at the school assembly, a month later, to talk about bullying and healing, the auditorium was completely silent, not out of boredom, but respect. Her scars didn't vanish. The memories didn't magically disappear. But she had taken control of her story. She had taken them down, not with violence, not with revenge, but with strength, truth, and the courage to speak when it mattered most. And all of that, before the bell had even rung. After the assembly, things weren't perfect, but they were different. For Anaya, the hardest part wasn't standing up in front of the school. It was waking up the next morning and choosing to go back to that same classroom. The place where her hair was cut. The place where she bled. The place where she was laughed at. But she did. When she walked into class that day, the room fell silent again, but not the mocking kind. It was the kind of silence that held weight. That said, we remember. Sarah wasn't there. Mina and Adil were still suspended. But that wasn't why it felt different. A girl from the front row, Nimra, moved her books aside and waved Anaya over. "Wanna sit here today?" Anaya hesitated. She wasn't used to kindness. Especially not from classmates. She'd spent so long building walls around herself that she forgot what it felt like to be invited in. But slowly, cautiously, she nodded and took the seat. During group work, another student asked if she wanted to join their team. At lunch, a boy from her art class told her he liked her sketchbook. And in the library, she found a note stuck inside her usual reading spot. "You're brave. Thank you for speaking up." She didn't know who left it. But she held onto it for days. The school administration didn't stop with just suspensions. The principal, shaken by what happened, launched a campaign, Voices Matter. They brought in counselors. Workshops were organized. Students were encouraged to anonymously report bullying. A wall was put up in the main hallway where kids could draw or write about what made them feel invisible, and what made them feel strong. Anaya's mural became the centerpiece. She painted a girl standing in a storm. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, but she stood tall, holding a candle in the rain. Around her, shadows of people mocked, jeered, and tried to put out the flame. But the flame never went out. At the base, in small letters, she wrote, "They tried to cut me down. I learned to stand taller." 2 weeks later, Sarah returned to school. She walked in without her usual confidence. Her eyes darted across the hallway, unsure who was watching. For the first time, she looked small. At first, Anaya ignored her. But one day, after school, Sarah approached her quietly outside the art room. "I'm not here to excuse what I did," she said. "There's no excuse. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Anaya didn't respond right away. She looked Sarah in the eyes and said, "It wasn't just about my hair. It was about treating me like I didn't matter. Like I didn't feel pain. You knew what you were doing." Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. "I did. And I regret it. Every single day." There was a pause. Anaya said softly, "Then prove it. Don't just say sorry to me. Change." And with that, she walked past her, her head held higher than ever. At home, things slowly began to shift too. Her mother, noticing the sudden surge in attention and emotion, sat Anaya down one evening. "I saw the mural," she said. "Your art is beautiful." "But what happened, Anaya? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Anaya blinked back tears. "I thought you had enough to worry about." Her mother wrapped her in the tightest hug she'd ever felt. "You never have to face pain alone again. Ever." In the months that followed, Anaya continued to heal, not just from the bullying, but from years of feeling small, unseen, and silent. She started journaling. She helped others through the school's peer support program. And one day, a younger student who'd been crying in the hallway asked her, "Are you the girl from the mural?" Anaya smiled gently and said, "Yes. But more importantly, I'm someone who understands." The student hugged her without warning. By the end of the school year, Anaya had not only reclaimed her voice, she had inspired others to find theirs too. And when she stood up at the final school assembly to receive the Resilience and Leadership Award, the entire hall erupted in a standing ovation. She didn't cry. She smiled. Not because everything was perfect now, but because she had walked through fire and found herself stronger on the other side. Final message. This wasn't just a story about bullying. It was about identity, courage, and what it means to be seen. Anaya didn't fight back with fists or cruelty. She used her voice, her art, and her strength to bring about real change, not just for herself, but for an entire school. To anyone who's ever felt invisible, you matter. You have a voice. And when you decide to use it, the world will listen.